The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. The Story of an Hour is a short story written by Kate Chopin on April 19, 1894. It was originally published in Vogue on December 6, 1894 as The Dream of an Hour. It was later reprinted in St. Louis Life on January 5, 1895 as The Story of an Hour. The title of the short story refers to the time elapsed between the moments at which the protagonist, Louis Mallard, hears that her husband, Brenly Mallard, is dead, then discovers that he is alive after all. Featuring a female protagonist who feels liberation at the news of her husband's death, The Story of an Hour was controversial by American standards in the 1890s. We will see the synopsis of the story. Mrs. Louis Mallard is at home when her sister Josephine and her husband's friend Richards come to tell her that her husband Brenly Mallard has been killed in a railroad accident. Richards had been at the newspaper office when the news broke, and he takes Josephine with him to break the news to Louis, since they are afraid of aggravating her heart condition. Upon hearing the news of her husband's death, Louis is grief-stricken, locks herself in her room, and weeps. From here, the story shifts in tone. As Louis processes the news of her husband's death, she realizes something wonderful and terrible at the same time. She is free. At first, she is scared to admit it, but Louis quickly finds peace and joy in her admission. She realizes that although she will be sad about her husband, Louis is excited for the opportunity to live for herself. She keeps repeating the word free as she comes to terms with what her husband's death means for her life. In the meantime, Josephine sits at Louise's door, requesting her to come out because she is worried about Louise's heart condition. After praying that her life is long-lived, Louis agrees to come out. However, as she comes downstairs, the front door opens to reveal her husband, who had not been killed by the accident at all. Although Richards tries to keep Louis' heart from shock by shielding her husband from view, Louis dies suddenly, which the doctors later attribute to heart disease of the joy that kills. The interpretations of the story. One of the clearest themes found in The Story of an Hour is the theme of freedom. Once the grief of finding out her husband died passes over her, Louis begins to realize that with his passing, she has the freedom to live her own life. We can see the moment this realization hits as she whispers, "Free, free, free." Louis comes to the realization that she is free to live her life the way she chooses. No longer is she shackled to a marriage, but she gains a new independence. This independence to live life as she chooses brings a renewed sense of hope. Chopin solidifies this theme through actions like her pulse beats fast, blood warmed, and monstrous joy. We feel the new possibilities springing up in her and breathe new life into her. Louis begins to revel in what this new freedom can bring her and embrace it. When she leaves the room to go with her sister, she is in the shadow of the woman she entered the room as, but renewed. However, all her hopes are dashed when her husband walks through the door. In that moment, the dreams she had begun to embrace are crashed, leading to her death. Though Louis is hinted at being a very intelligent woman, she had no control over her life and decisions because of the time period. If she were to get a job, she would make considerably less than men and only have specific positions available. Additionally, she was expected to complete specific duties at home like cooking and cleaning. Therefore, she has no real identity of her own. When she finds out Brindley has died, the promise of becoming her own person and gaining her own identity fills her with happiness. During the early 1900s, women like Louis were considered to be weak. This weakness is further exacerbated by Louis' heart condition. But it also works to show that during that time, women should be passive, subservient, and unexcitable. Therefore, women had to try to mold themselves into this role, leading many times to depression and other issues. The force from Louis trying to be that person has made her weak and fear life. Chopin also shows how freedom is not a realistic dream in the 19th century society for women through the way Louis' dream is crushed when Brindley walks through the door. The final theme found in this story is love and marriage. Louis' marriage is completely loveless. We can see this through the way she cries and is devastated when finding out he is dead. It wasn't a loveless marriage but ultimately crushed Louis. It was the shackles of servitude marriage brought with it at that time for women. In the 1890s, working women were generally looked down on by society, regardless of why they needed work. Women who worked while married or pregnant were judged even more harshly. Women of Kate Chopin's social rank were expected not to work at all, sometimes even delegating household or child-rearing responsibilities to maids or nannies. In response, the National American Women's Suffrage Association was formed in 1890 to fight for women's social and political rights. Although Kate Chopin was not a formal member of the suffragette movement, she did believe that women should have greater freedom as individuals and often spoke about these ideas in her work, including in The Story of an Hour.